Welcome to Season 2 of the Culinary Saijiki podcast. This season, I'm going back to Haiku's roots, pun intended, and focusing on how agriculture and food show up in the work of the classical poets. For more food and haiku goodness, you can read the blog at culinarysaijiki.com. And if you would like to be a guest this season, go to the blog and fill out the contact form. You can support the project by going to buymeacoffee.com/culinarysaijiki or simply share this show with whoever you think would enjoy it. All right, let's get started with today's topic. Welcome to a very special episode of the Culinary Saijiki. This week's episode is a talk/workshop that I gave at Haiku North America in Cincinnati last week. It was my first time at Haiku North America, and I had just the most amazing experience I could have hoped for. Part of that was the people. I got to see my friend Agnes in person for the first time in over a year, and I finally got to connect in real life with so many friends with whom I've only had online relationships. My friend Warren came all the way from Japan to go to this event, and we were in the same MFA program. I think I was a year ahead of him. We've had a haiku correspondence since 2017, and this was the first time we met in person, and it was fantastic to just get to hang out and talk in real life. We did a lot of study, we did a lot of writing, we did a lot of discussion, and we did a lot of partying. I am still recovering from that late night karaoke and hangout session, but you know what, it's nice to know that even as I am approaching middle-aged, I can still do the stay out all night thing every once in a while. Anyway, I got to give this talk on Thursday, the first full day of the conference, and I was just amazed at the turnout and the participation. When I've been at academic conferences, usually the people on the first full day, it's a little iffy in terms of attendance. I had a really full crowd, and a lot of people wanted to do the open mic. Almost everyone did. When I was putting slides together and trying to budget time for different components, I had no idea how many people were going to show up or how many people would even be willing to read their work aloud on something that was going to be recorded and put online. I was like, maybe I'll have 10 people. All I knew, it could have been worse than that, but I was like, I'll be happy if 10 people want to read. And nearly everyone in the room wanted to read. And you'll hear that surprise and excitement in my voice on the recording. Just blown away. So thank you all for everyone who not only came to the talk, but were willing to share your work. We had the Thursday events in the Mercantile Library. So it was off-site, and it was a beautiful space. Old building, high windows, natural light, great acoustics, interesting books, that old book smell. I feel very fortunate that I got to present in that space. And I've got to say, it was really nice to be able to go to events off-site just for one day and just be somewhere other than hotel ballrooms. It was so fun. And just I feel fortunate that we got to do that. Not much in the way of the editorial notes for this talk. Really just two things. One, I would occasionally interrupt the talk with about 3 minutes of time to write, edit, or reflect. And I gave some prompts to guide that. I decided to edit out the 3 minutes of silence because who wants to listen to a podcast where there are occasionally multiple minutes of nothing? At least I don't. So I have included the part where I offer the discussion questions, and then I'm going to just use my transition sound and cut to the next part of the talk. If you would like to write along, with the presentation. You can always hit pause, set a timer for 3 minutes, or as long as you want, really, because you're on your own, doing your own thing, and then dive back in when you're ready to return. One other note, at one point in the open mic, there is a reader who reads their haiku twice, but forgets to say their name, and that person is Bona M. Santos. So when you hear that, just remember that is Bona M. Santos, and I'm so glad she came up and reminded me of that so I could make a note and put it in the show notes because I want to make sure she gets credited. So, anyway, great first experience. We're going to get into the talk. One more thing I have to say is it was also super surreal because HNA overlapped with a 2-night Taylor Swift engagement. I feel pretty solidly neutral about Taylor Swift. It was, I will say, completely surreal to just have been dropped into, like, TaylorCon. Because so many people from the show, I think our hotel was like 160 poets and then, I don't know, 1,000 Taylor Swift fans or whatever. We were definitely in the minority. And I sometimes felt like I was just like in a anthropology type situation, observing things from the outside. An interesting dose of, or exposure, an interesting exposure to a side of society I have honestly never encountered before. So, super fascinating. I sort of imagine that where there's going to be maybe some interesting, I don't know, haibun or group writing about that experience that comes out of people who were at HNA this year. Anyway, with that, I will get into the talk. Thanks again to Jennifer Hambrick for taking on the grueling work of being a conference chair, to Nikki Gutierrez and Elliot Nicely for being some truly top-notch assistants and doing their best to manage what is always just a low level of chaos. I've managed conferences before. It's a lot. Conferences, dance competitions, either way, something's going to go wrong, things are going to get confusing, and they handled it really well. And thanks also to the Mercantile Library for hosting us on Thursday, and especially to Cedric for making this audio sound as good as it possibly could have. I have had bad luck with my recording this intro this afternoon, but you know what? I did not have bad luck with audio on recording day, and that was the only thing I was at all nervous about, and it worked. And I'm so happy that it did. So thanks again to everyone involved with HNA this year. And hopefully I'll see some of you in 2024. But if not, I'll see you in San Francisco in 2025.
The final session of our morning here in the Mercantile Library. Then we head over to the Hilton for lunch and come back for our afternoon sessions here in this beautiful space. The theme of HNA 2023, as you know, is City and Soil. And we have no closer connection to the soil than working with it to grow our sustenance. It's a relationship that, like all relationships, including family relationships, is complex and loving and mysterious. The HNA Program Committee had decided on City and Soil as the theme of this conference, and we're ideating topics for sessions when I discovered Allison Whipple's Culinary Saijiki podcast devoted to exploring the intersections of haiku and food. I joined Allison as a guest on an episode of the podcast, and the HNA Program Committee thought it would be just a fabulous thing to do an interactive taping of a special edition of the podcast as a session here at HNA. So we invited Allison to present, and here we are. This hour, you'll have a chance to share your haiku that have to do with food and family, and Allison will tell us what all else. And again, this session will be audio recorded for possible future release as an episode of Culinary Saijiki. So Allison Whipple presents haiku, food, and digging into your roots.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be presenting at my very first HNA. And Big thank you to Cedric for making sure all of the AV was working, because this is my first live podcast recording. Season 2 just launched last Wednesday, and this will be part of Season 2. So this is being recorded, and there will be time at the end for you to all come up and read your work. So, in case you didn't read the syllabus, which you didn't because I was a professor for 10 years, that means you will also be recorded and put on the show. And I hope that doesn't deter you, because I want to hear what you would have to say. And so please, if you came with something to read and you're afraid of being recorded, or I get through the presentation and you start second-guessing yourself about whether or not you should read, you should. Please come up. I want to hear you. It will be great. If you feel even momentarily embarrassed, remember that the internet has a very short attention span. So it'll be fine. And with that, let us get, I'm going to just use that. So my name is Allison Whipple, and I am so excited to be recording this, and everything seems to be working. I came with, well, they have a recorder, and I have two, just in case things failed. So while Season 2 is focusing on classical haiku, this is a very special episode, as they say for all of you 80s kids. So I'm not going to be limiting myself to classical examples for this presentation, but because Season 2 is also really focused on agriculture and connections to place and to family, even if I'm using contemporary haiku for this presentation, I think that is just fine. And also, all of my, analyses of all these haiku are my interpretation only. I just, as a recovering academic, I just feel like I really need to say that. Having written a long time and knowing that so many times the reader's response to your work is not what you intended. So these are just my responses to the work, and if you feel differently, great. All right, so I will be starting with the presentation. And I will be giving little brief pauses throughout. I even have a timepiece so I can stick to time. So they are going to just be really short blurbs for just maybe reflection or sketching things out. And then there will be an open mic at the end. And maybe there will be time for questions. Maybe there won't. You can always just come up and ask me questions later. That's fine. And if you want to be on the show, find me. It'll be fun. I don't bite. It's great. All right. So in this presentation, I'm going to focus on 3 principal ways that food connects us to heritage and memory. First, in the direct invocation of family or friend or close friends, because we know they can be family too. Sensory experience, not just taste and smell, but the way that food connects to all of our senses. And to temporality, aka the sense of time in our haiku. From a technique standpoint, I'll focus on how the turn of the haiku at either the second or third line emphasizes that sense of connection. I am really more of a content person than a technique person at this point in my life, but we want to talk about the technique a little bit. So invoking family. Our parents and grandparents cook for us. We collaborate on big family meals at holidays, and one of the best ways to connect as people is to sit down together for a meal, which we're going to be doing this whole festival, and I'm so excited. So by invoking family alongside food, we create strong associations in the haiku between food and heritage. Mama's gifts, filled, wrapped, tied with care, tamales. Mama's gifts, filled, wrapped, tied with care, tamales. It's Christine Wenck-Harrison. So the opening line invokes the family member, mama, and you're just going to see that people really invoke their mothers and grandmothers a lot, overwhelmingly. My whole collection, whole lot of moms, whole lot of grandmas. So maybe you might explore invoking other family members in your own haiku. The turn happens at the end of the second line with that nice em dash. You can ask me about punctuation later. And that creates a sense of surprise because we've got that third line, a single word, that identifies what the gift is. It's not a new sweater, it's not a new iPhone, it is delicious, delicious tamales. And tamales are also, to make them fresh, it's a pretty labor-intensive meal. It is something, if Mama made them alone, that is an incredible gift. I don't know if you've ever made tamales, but it is very commonly a communal act. It is a part of the holidays, and it's everyone in the kitchen getting together and helping out. So if they were a collaborative effort, the gift is not just of the tamales, but it's of time and community and shared knowledge. The simple way she cut into small pieces the cantaloupe for us. The simple way she cut into small pieces the cantaloupe for us. Robert Epstein. So although it's not made explicit the way I've put it up here, when this first appeared in the Culinary Saijiki blog, Robert Epstein did note to me that this was written for his mother. And while he is honoring a specific relative here, the use of her means that for the reader, this poem could invoke a grandmother, an aunt, a close family friend, or any other relative who has nurtured children by using that more indefinite pronoun. That invites the reader to make their own connections. It's specific to Robert's life, but becomes very universal and accessible to our own lives. It makes me think of the way my mom would slice apples for me as a kid. Different person, different fruit, same sentiment, same resonance. This haiku also points to the idea that it is not just one specific food that can connect us to heritage. Often it is. Tamales, for example, often specific food. But sometimes it is the method of preparation that's most evocative. When I think about that part in Sleepless in Seattle where Tom Hanks's character is talking about how his late wife could peel an apple in one fell swoop, and Meg Ryan's character is doing it at the same time. That's like the only part of that movie I remember. But it really stood out. Grandma's cookbook, a dried pumpkin seed stuck on the blurb page. Grandma's cookbook, a dried pumpkin seed stuck on the blurb page. Lakshmi Iyer. The opening line presents the image of I'm going to go with it's a used cookbook, right? And I imagine stains, wrinkled pages, dog-eared corners, maybe even like a burn on the back cover where you left it on the stove and forgot about it. That happens. The turn happens in the second line. We don't see a recipe, but rather a pumpkin seed stuck on the page. I interpret this haiku as the speaker is the inheritor of the cookbook and grandma is not around anymore. And to me, that image of the stuck pumpkin seed emphasizes that sense of connection to the ancestors. Not only is there a link through the recipes, but through the remains of past cooking projects. Who knows how long that pumpkin seed has been on there? It might not even be able to be removed. It might be stuck on there, and if you tried to remove it, it would tear the page out. It's the recipes, it's the past projects, and it's the physical object of the book. All right, let's take 3 minutes to reflect and write. Now, if you brought a draft of a haiku because you read the syllabus, great. I know some of you did. I was very excited to hear that. But if you don't have one, that's okay. But if you brought a draft of a haiku, just make note, does it invoke a specific family member? And guess it doesn't have to. That might not be relevant to your particular poem, that's okay. But think about in your own poem, what are the specific ways you make a direct connection between food and family? And is there a way you might strengthen that connection? Or maybe you deliberately want to make it more ambiguous. That's up to you. Now, if you didn't bring a haiku, you can just reflect on some of the examples I've put up or examples you've seen. Note how many allusions there are to mothers, and guess what, there are going to be actually even more later in the presentation, but I couldn't just make this mom cooked for me haiku. So think about your own work. Do you focus on one specific family member? Are there ways you could connect to other family members in haiku? All right, the sensory experience. So taste and smell are straightforward senses that connect to food. But what about the sight, the sound, the touch, the way a piece of fruit feels in your hand, the way a perfectly cooked bowl of tomato soup feels on your tongue? Mouthfeel is a word for a reason. Think of the sound of an onion frying, not just the sound or the smell, but the way it sounds. The feel the softness of a fresh peach, or the visual beauty of a perfect lattice pie crust. For those of you who have the patience to do one of those, I salute you. Back home, the smell of lemon pickle in each room. Back home, the smell of lemon pickle in each room. Mona Betty. In the first line of the poem, we're placed at home, and that turn, I would argue that turn happens at the end of the first line, but maybe I'm just biased toward M-dashes, used to say. In the second and third lines, Mona Betty conveys the scent of that lemon pickle throughout the house. And I interpret this haiku as to be about returning to one's childhood home and being surrounded by the familiar and comforting smells. It's like a scented hug. And this could, perhaps, because I like to provide other readings when possible, this could perhaps also be about returning to one's adult home after long travel and feeling comforted by familiar scents and foods. You could also read it that way. But either way, there is a returning to either where you grew up or where your roots are now. And that sensory experience makes you feel really settled. It's like culinary aromatherapy. Homesickness. Potato and lentil stew warming weary hands. Homesickness. Potato and lentil stew warming weary hands. Danny Daw. So the sense of touch is the main input in Danny's haiku. While the smell of the stew might help with the homesickness, it's that physical warmth that invokes maybe a hug or, a warm blanket. The physical comfort of a family member the speaker misses. Taste and smell are important senses, but sometimes it's not the act of eating that creates the connection. It might be, again, something tactile or just the way something looks, like a beautiful tray of cookies that remind you of the Christmas cookies you grew up with. We can use different senses to create fresh takes on how food ties us to heritage in different ways. Home for the holidays, Mum's Irish stew boiling over. Home for the holidays, Mum's Irish stew boiling over. Lori Kiefer. Stew, also something people really like to write about. I would say the primary sense in this haiku is sound, is the bubbling of the stew, especially as it gets to boiling over, maybe liquids running out, hitting the burner. It's like the hiss of the gas range. And the holidays, they can be a mixed bag of emotions, joy and connection, but that can exist at the same time as conflict and tension. It's not necessarily either or. It's usually both and. I mean, for some people it is just all sunshine and rainbows and cookies, but for a lot of us, it's that both and. And Lori's haiku is able to embody both the comforts of the stew and the struggles of being home by using that sensory detail, by using that sound of stew on a pot, getting a little crazy. All right, so some prompts for reflection or writing. And these are just prompts. You can do whatever you want with these 3 minutes. This is just to get you thinking. If you brought a draft of haiku, does it contain one of the 5 senses? If not, do you think that using a sensory image could enhance the poem? And you can say no. Again, I'm not grading you. That's the great thing about not being a professor anymore. I don't have to give you grades. And if you're feeling more reflective rather than writing, doing some drafting, how often do you incorporate the senses into your haiku? Do you tend to rely heavily on one sense at the expense of other senses? And some senses are more challenging to convey than others. I've read that smell is the one most directly tied to memory, but it's also the one that's hardest to convey. I don't know how true that is, but it feels pretty true to me. Which ones do you struggle with, and how might you practice with them more? The final thing I want to talk about is temporality. The time it takes to cook a meal or to walk around a neighborhood. The time that spans across generations or that passes without seeing your friends in person. Time is an abstraction, yet we experience it in a concrete way. The haiku moment is brief, but infusing time into your haiku can have a tremendous impact. I feel like this could be a whole separate presentation unto itself, but mushroom bourguignon, with old friends devouring our years. Mushroom bourguignon, with old friends devouring our years. Dorothy Burroughs. And I apologize for my French pronunciation. Too many vowels. Don't know how to do it. The opening line identifies the dish we are eating, a vegetarian version of a French classic. The second line contains the image of dining with friends. And I believe that the true turn of the poem is at the end of the second line. We go from the literal experience of eating to metaphorically consuming time. This line takes us from the typical image to something unexpected and a little abstract. But just because it's abstract doesn't mean it's inaccessible. Close friends are a form of chosen family, and even if years pass without being able to see each other, I think we're all, really feeling that right now. When people are reunited, time falls away. Hometown visit. Papa and my walks, a bag of peanuts long. I know, right? Hometown visit. Papa and my walks, a bag of peanuts long. Vandana Parashar. In Vandana's haiku, food is explicitly connected to time, the duration of a walk with her father. And as with many haiku in this presentation, this poem is written from the perspective of an adult visiting a childhood home. This haiku is located in the present, yet the image harkens back to a familiar childhood ritual, at least in my interpretation, the special time when you get that undivided attention of one particular parent. Especially, even if you are an only child, I think there is something special about getting uninterrupted time to go out for ice cream, to play a game. It's something that's really special. Waiting for your call, the percolator welling up. Waiting for your call, the percolator welling up. Whether waiting for good news, bad news, or just to hear someone's voice, time stretches out far too long as the speaker waits for an important phone call. The use of the word your in the first line suggests a sense of connection. I think we'd be less likely to use direct address for an insurance company representative or an auto mechanic. Maybe that sense of time does feel long, but we wouldn't use quite as familiar speech. The act of making coffee can seem to take an impossibly a long time, especially if you're real caffeine deprived. And having to wait for a percolator to boil connects to the tension of waiting for a call. In the third line, we see that the percolator has started to bubble. The sounds of the coffee complement the anxious energy of the haiku and that longing for connection. Maybe this poet wants to be able to share a cup of coffee with the person rather than just talking to them on the phone. All right, 3 more minutes of writing. We are doing great on time. Good job, me. 3 more minutes of writing/reflecting, and then I will go over some. I don't think I'm really going to need to do ground rules for the open mic. I'm coming at you from mainstream poetry where you have to like have rules and enforce them. But you all see, the haiku people seem like a really well behaved and respectful bunch. But we'll take 3 minutes, and then you get to come. You'll record, and I think we're passing mics around. But while you're reflecting, I will confirm that. So again, if you brought a draft, note how you engage with the concept of time. Is it purely in the present? Again, totally cool, because maybe that's the way it needs to be. Or are you engaging with the past or even the future in some subtle way? We do know that haiku is often written from the perspective of the present moment, even if that's poetic license. We've talked about writing haiku about past experiences in other venues. So how could you play more with time in your work? Changing verb tense is an option, but note how the examples that I just gave you, they all really stay in the present while invoking some sort of past connection. And also, a nice thing to reflect on, do you write in present tense because somebody said you had to? Do you think it's worth experimenting with past or even future tense? I feel like future tense is the hardest, but is it worth it?
My name is Elliot Nicely. My haiku. Yellowed recipe card. The cool of each hand scoop of flour.
Hi, my name is Ben Ga, and my poem is Seaside Cafe, the bottomless cup of her story.
My name is Lou Watts. Dad's old recipe, wondering what will kill me.
I'm Michael Nichols Wisdom. Potatoes in earnest and lemons always smiling.
Terry French. Father's words, the scrape of a butter knife across burnt toast.
30 years married, David Oates. 30 years married, in-season cantaloupe, perfectly ripe.
Terry Ann Carter. Family reunion. So many ways to slice a peach.
Hi, I'm Elena, and waiting for you is like waiting for water to boil.
Rosalie Van Nals, my husband, sprinkling sugar on buttered bread, eating with knife and fork.
Picking sweet corn. Dad skips my breakup.
Hi, I'm Ellen Austin Lee. White enamel cake pan, Grandma's cookin' ghosts the kitchen, apples and cinnamon.
Marcin Del Clements, Grandma Emily's angel pie before her dementia.
Marjorie Butner, missing her, something lost, then remembered in the taste of it.
Agnes Eva Savage, cabbage rolls, tucking myself in to Grandma's blanket.
Denise Fontaine Pinsence, from the city, his cubed squash and mashed potatoes shared a platter.
Edward Cody Huddleston, campfire marshmallows, an urge to spear a cloud.
Lynn Jambor, my disappointment, subsumed in cinnamon rolls.
Dave Russo, a little dangerous, her burnt sugar icing for blackberry cake.
Warren Decker, just like Dad's saving bacon grease to fry the flounder.
Deborah Kalochi, Mom's old bead pot, the taste of 100 family dinners.
Brian Demuth, dinner with the in-laws, finally getting to meet the manicotti.
Judson Evans, sibling rivalry, the oral transmission of my mother's kale soup.
Ryland Lee, Blue Cliff Monastery, awakening my taste for mushrooms.
Chuck Brickley, San Francisco, hanging on my granddaughter's every word, a banana string.
Oh my God. Sorry, that's memory. Unrelated, but sorry.
Tia Haynes, buttered noodles, giving my daughters Dad's signature dish.
Jeff Hoagland, 4th of July, the Calamondans that we share.
Peg Sharon Myers, scrambled eggs, the baby chicks fluttering in my belly.
Mary Sigwin, come to the table. Cast iron holds Grandma's gifts, memories that feed us. At the stove and apron, chicken sizzles and crackles, turning fork, piercing chicken.
Holly Bryan's Ragusa, Grandpa's pimento cheese, once spread on Mom's lips, now on my own.
Jonathan English, she slices into the smell of cinnamon and cloves, giving thanks.
Charlie Trumbull, small town motel, from behind the front desk, a whiff of curry.
Office misery turning into chopped liver. Office misery turning into chopped liver.
Patricia Mockmiller, San Jose, California. She calls and says, I'm coming over. Strawberry muffins.
Anna Eklund Chong. After Disneyland, all his Sunday pancakes, sprouting ears.
C. Rosenau, savoring the brine. Last jar of Dad's homemade pickles.
Julie Bloss Kelsey, yet another attempt at his baked eggplant. I dredge up a smile.
Pigs in the blanket, each New Year's Day, rooting forward. Oh, Marilyn Shoemaker Hazelton.
Brian Rickert, in-laws visit. I got the melon instead.
Vicki Curtis, every Thanksgiving, hand-cranked cranberries, your specialty.
Ron Craig, grandmother, serves us breakfast outdoors, cool metal lawn chairs.
All right, it's just about time for lunch. So thank you, Nikki and Elliot, for really controlling that chaos very well. I was very impressed. Thank you so much. Thank you to the Mercantile Library for hosting us in this incredible space with fantastic acoustics. And thank you, Jennifer Hambrick, for letting me record this and for all of the work you have done. It's amazing. Thank you.
So I had initially planned to not record an outro for this episode. I had really liked the idea of just playing the closing music over the thanks and applause, but as I was editing and re-listening to everything, I feel compelled to explain my intense reaction to Chuck Brickley's haiku. I meant to tell him about it at HNA, and then it was a very busy conference, lots of people, lots of running around. We didn't really get to see each other in person as much as I would have liked. So Chuck Brickley had the haiku about his daughter and the banana strings. And the reason I responded so viscerally to that is when I was a young child, I did not like the banana strings. They bothered me. I do not know why. but they absolutely did. And I would call them banana worms and peel off all of the strings before I would eat the banana. And banana worms were something that was just funny to my family for many, many years. And, you know, if we had occasion to bring it up again, it would probably still be funny. But yeah, Chuck's poem just brought back to me that really visceral memory of not liking the banana strings and pulling them off one by one and having what I thought as a 4-year-old was a pejorative name for them. So anyway, thank you for those who were able to be there in person. I'm so happy with how this turned out. And to all of you out there taking this podcast in over cyberspace, thank you for listening.